Welcome to the Space Update. No, you haven't clicked on the wrong podcast. We are now part of the fantastic Total Space Network. Woo! So what was previously Talking Space is now the Space Update. Coming up today, we've got all the recent space news. We'll be taking a look at NASA's InSight lander, updates from SpaceX down at Boca Chica, and at the very end of the show, we'll be answering listener questions. I'm Ryan, Mr. Space Update himself, and joining me today are my wonderful co-host.
I'm AnotherSpaceNut. Thanks for joining today, guys. We've also got...
I'm Mikko. Thanks for joining us.
Plus, the big news this week, water has been found on the sunlit surface of the moon. Plus, Starlink has moved to the next stage of beta testing and released initial costs of $499 for initial supply and installation of the dish, and then roll a monthly cost of $99 per month with the speeds of up to 50 to 150 megabytes per second. So we'll have to check another deep dive of that with Mikko again on Starlink at some point.
Yeah.
SLS is ready for a full duration static fire of those 5 massive engines on the core stage of NASA's SLS rocket. And as we predicted, NROL 101 will launch sometime in November on the mighty Atlas V before the cursed Delta IV Heavy, or the Delta 4 Heavy if you like to call it, and that was supposed to be launching the NROL 44. Multiple delays on that one. Hopefully we'll get it sorted soon. This next launch with the Atlas V will use the new GEM 63 boosters, which is more interesting because they're going to be destined for the ULA's Vulcan Centaur rocket. So this next launch with the Atlas V will be the first launch with seeing those boosters used. Plus, in the future, coming weeks and so, we've got many more Starlink launches, and we've got confirmation from NASA that Crew 1 launch has been confirmed for the 14th of November.
Right, so we got some great news about NASA's InSight Mars lander, but first let's take a quick look at the mission. Lander's full name is Interior Exploration Using Seismic Investigations, Geodesy and Heat Transport, or InSight. Gotta love those guys or gals who come up with those names. So the lander is designed to study the deep interior of Mars. Even though it's a NASA mission, many of the science instruments came from European agencies, for example from Germany, I think also from France. The mission was launched May 5th, 2018 on an Atlas V rocket, and it landed on Mars about 6 months later. Landing site is Elysium Planitia. Have you heard anything about the landing site? Would it be a good site for humans to land on?
I believe that's the site where they're planning on landing with the humans on Mars, isn't it?
So InSight's objectives were to place a seismometer called SEIS, Seismic Experiment for Interior Structure, on the surface of Mars to measure seismic activity and provide accurate 3D models of the planet's interior. And the funny side note about this instrument, SEIS is a Finnish word and it means stop. That's probably not related here, but fun thing for me anyway. The other objective was to measure internal heat flow using a heat probe called HB3, short for Heat Flow and Physical Properties Package, to study Mars's early geological evolution.
Yeah, the interior of Mars is quite interesting because we've studied a lot of the surface, where's water, where's ice, what's the general surface of Mars made up of, but the actual interior we still know very little in terms of how it's made, what's there underneath the surface really.
I think it might teach us a little bit more about some of those lava tubes that we've seen on Mars. That would be quite interesting to sort of take a deep analysis and look and see, how vast some of them are and what might have caused them at an earlier date in Mars's history.
Definitely, and there's all those ancient volcanoes and Olympus Mons, I believe is it on Mars?
Yeah, I think it's about 20 kilometers high, and really any of those lava tubes or some volcano could be a place where humans could live someday.
Pretty extreme because it's a hell of a lot bigger than Mount Everest and everything. Pretty crazy. Though you got less gravity, so it won't be too bad.
Yeah, So there was the seismic instrument and heat instrument, and those were the two main instruments. But there is also instruments to measure the rotation of Mars among other sensors. And I mean, there would be no rover without a camera and the temperature sensors. Even before this, Viking landers have also measured Marsquakes, but the results could not be verified, so this lander's job is to confirm the existence of Marsquakes.
It's quite interesting about the Mars quake because similar thing on the Moon. The Moon actually has small quakes and everything like that, so there's studying that. And likewise on Mars, they've got to take that into account because obviously you have all the dust storms on Mars, yearly, monthly, however often it is. But there's also the factor of Mars quakes. We haven't stepped foot on Mars yet, so we don't know the total risks of these quakes. Are they minor tremors, or are they the higher Richter scale, as in on the Earth, and to what extent do they happen and how often?
It's critical, isn't it? And that's what becoming multiplanetary is about. The other show, it's about discussing what's needed to get us there, and the InSight rover definitely starts to become a pathfinder for future manned missions. Tricks of survival are learnt with these rovers, and they're paving the way for these pioneers to go on and put boots down safely.
Yeah, exactly. So in December 2018, InSight was first to ever record an audio clip of the Mars wind, and before that humans hadn't heard the wind. Earlier this year, we got some interesting information back about the science experiments. Studies have found that Mars has active quakes, dust devils, and magnetic pulses. The magnetic field is also about 10 times stronger than expected. So before we get to the latest news, what do you think about these findings?
I mean, it's interesting. I mean, we're learning more and more as we go on. As we've already got quite a few rovers, past and present. I mean, Perseverance is due to land on Mars early January, mid-January. So again, that's got a whole host of new experiments on board, including high-resolution cameras. And this Perseverance rovers, again, like the odd one or two past rovers, it's going to have microphones on board so they can listen to all the sounds, plus that little mini helicopter on board. So that's another element to that rover as well.
Yeah, I really want to see that small helicopter fly.
The Ingenuity helicopter is quite possibly one of the single most exciting thoughts of Mars missions in recent years.
It's one of the things that I'm surprised they haven't done it sooner, but then it's just all the engineering aspect of it, and drones in general have only just picked up in the past 5-10 years, really, haven't they?
Yeah, absolutely. I think drones were quite expensive a few years ago, and these days on Earth they've become quite affordable.
A few years ago you would see these drones as sort of luxury toys for millionaire playboys almost, people that had money to spare, that didn't mind throwing a small fortune at them. But now, I mean, especially with the birth of such technology innovation that's coming out, you've got replica companies that are even putting them online for next to peanuts. It's really good to see NASA capitalizing on current technology like that and saying, okay, let's put this on the surface of Mars and let's engineer it to work there.
Yeah. And just bouncing back to what you've just been talking there, Mikko, I think it's vitally important that we measure all these quakes, tremors, the winds, and just the general environment, because until we know that, we won't know the true risks. We know a certain amount of information from satellites and the rovers, but we need to study it fully before we venture from the Moon and onwards to Mars, just for our own safety if we're actually going to send anyone there.
Yeah, that's true. This is probably one of the first times NASA actually doesn't have to invent something, and they use technology that's already used on Earth. Of course, they had to design the propellers to actually work in the Martian atmosphere. From the start, the InSight lander has had problems with the temperature probe that was supposed to dig itself 5 meters into the ground. It was quickly realized that it simply didn't get the friction needed to dig itself like in the simulations. There has been several attempts to push the mole underground, and every time it has popped back to surface. But now they have gotten it under the surface and are using the scoop to scrape additional soil on top of it while tamping it down. This will take months, and further mole hammering is expected early next year. So finally some good news about the probe.
Yeah, just slowly but surely getting there. It seems that they're underestimated the bedrock of what they're cutting through. Whether it's more crumbly than what they're expected, and the drill bit couldn't get hold of it. Obviously, if it's quite a soft subsurface, it's just going to be an absolute nightmare. But as they've found out, really.
Yeah, it's quite tough. I mean, it adds a lengthy amount of time to be able to correct as well, doesn't it? I was reading about it. And it really extends by a great deal the amount of time it takes to dig those core samples as well.
But once it's in there, it'll start giving us the goods, hopefully. And just a bit frustrating. It's going to take that long to get that probe down in there.
Yeah, but that shouldn't really be a problem for NASA, because their landers and rovers seems to last years instead of months they are supposed to work.
So off the back of what Mikko was just saying there, did you guys hear the recent NASA announcement regarding water on the surface of the moon? They found it on a sunlit part of the moon, which sort of supersedes the previous expectations that it was only in cold, shadowy places.
Yeah, I did hear about it. It was quite interesting to see that an Earth-based airplane actually made the discovery. Or the confirmation of it.
Yeah. I mean, that surprised me as well. I mean, there's been previous satellites that have tried to confirm water on the moon and everything like that, but NASA have had some disputes with that for whatever reason. I don't know if there wasn't enough evidence, or it's because that satellite wasn't designed to find that or what, but it really surprised me because I assumed there was already water on the moon from previous discoveries, but obviously that's not the case by the looks of it. It only found in shadowed areas up until a few days ago, but now it's been announced that it's actually underneath the sunlit surface, considerable quantities as well, which could bode well for mining and refueling on the surfaces of the moon.
Yeah, totally. And I think the reason it wasn't confirmed earlier is because the instruments on those satellites or probes were not sensitive enough to differentiate hydroxyl from water. So the sensors had detected some hydrogen-based element, so it was always possible it's water. And for the amount of water, they actually do a comparison that Sahara Desert has about 100 times more water than what SOFIA instrument detected in the lunar soil.
Yeah, and it quite surprised me, but at the same time, it didn't surprise me. You see a lot of moons, they're made up from the beginnings of the universe, meteorites and comets and materials that are smashed up, mushed together over billions of years to create moons and everything else. But when we study comets and asteroids, we're finding water and other minerals on there. So to me, it's no surprise, because the moon's probably essentially made from the similar materials anyway. So in a way, I'm not too surprised that they found water there from my point of view.
I mean, it's going to make interesting to see the amount of people that try and utilise this as an opportunity to create a startup looking at in situ resource utilisation. You know, we're seeing the birth of private companies shooting towards the stars, and I think really now would be a good time to, off the back of an announcement such as this, start designing projects to get to the moon, to start worrying about in situ resource utilisation, and really start to focus on humans sustaining a presence there, and this water is important to that.
All right, guys, let's talk SpaceX and Starship. Things are really picking up pace now. They're hitting some key milestones as well in recent weeks. 99% of you may be aware that SpaceX's SN8 is now fully constructed, barring those 3 vacuum engines. The top section of the nose got lifted and fitted to the main nose section of SN8. The early hours of Friday morning last week on the 23rd for everyone in the UK. Fun trivia question for Mikko and AnotherSpaceNut. What was the name of the heavy lift crane that lifted the nose section to SN8?
I'm embarrassed, I don't know.
Bluto, that's the name. It's one of the newer cranes they've got on the site there. They've got road closures on the 28th to the 30th. Some late morning to afternoons on this one. What you suspect they're moving or testing. I believe they've changed over one Raptor engine, so I believe they're probably going to go for another static fire. What are your guys' ideas?
I think they may actually have changed the engine just because it was a later version, so it could be a bit more powerful than the other two, or maybe they just found some bad data when testing or something like that.
Yeah, definitely. But the main rumour, I think it's been confirmed now in the past day or so that it's definitely going for another static fire just to prove out that engine is swapped over and everything. And more interestingly, they're only going to part fuel it up because those 3 Raptor engines, although they kick out almost £500,000 of thrust each, all 3, if they were firing full pelt and the tanks were actually full, it wouldn't actually lift off the ground. It's not actually designed to be a sea-level ground-to-orbit kind of rocket. So it's actually going to be a quarter or half fueled up to do that 15k pop.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable. I think they would need all 6 engines or maybe even 7th engine to get Starship flying with full tanks.
Yeah, I mean, this Starship, it's designed to be a second stage system anyway, so tests that they're doing here with hops and everything isn't vital to what they're the end game of the Starship system, but they're only going to fuel it up halfway on that 15k hop, so that's quite interesting to note. So they'll be limited on fuel for that landing by the looks of it, which should be quite interesting. Like whether it'll land or not, what are your ideas? Do you think it'll land?
It's going in the drink.
I think it's going to explode.
I think it's either going to go sideways and not flip and land, or by some fluke it'll land but the legs will fail. Could be coming down a lot faster, I assume, maybe.
I mean, in the animations, it's quite a vicious transformation at the last second, isn't it? From belly flop to ready to land.
Yeah, I'm quite afraid they may have problems starting the engines, because usually when they static fire, it's not that simple to get Raptor engines turned on.
And another fun fact, the high bay that they're construction, it's just about done now, but Elon's just mentioned he's going to put an actual bar up there, a 360 view bar. Rumours on the names, guys, what do you think?
That's going to be the best place to watch launches.
I think they should call it something edgy, like everything else, like the Boring Company and stuff. You should just call it not a bar. Some rumours that everyone wants to name it something after the Raptor engines or Starship or something like that, because I believe there's one of the creating like a cafe area just lower down from the actual high base. It has the first version of the Starship wings. The rumours are it's going to be like a Starship cafe, something like that. I mean, it's got to be a future Mecca, isn't it? Like, the UFO post box and stuff near Area 51. Like, over time, those wings are just going to become symbolic, and rocket nerds and space nuts from all over the world are going to flock there to get a photo in that cafe. And I think a lot of people are underestimating the Starship system as well, because if you look at what everyone else is doing, it's to the moon. It's not designed to go anywhere else. It's just a one money shot to the moon and then that's it kind of thing. It's done. Whereas SpaceX are developing the Starship system. It's going to go to the moon, fly around the world, point to point, go to the Mars, go to, I don't know, anywhere else, even land on asteroid Bennu or whatever you want. I mean, it's a Starship. Its future legacy lies in going star to star, not in our own galaxy. But, the end game of, I feel, that vision, by calling it a Starship, is to go to the next star and the one after and actually be a true star-hopping species. Yeah, and this Starship, and the Falcon 9s are deploying up to 60 Starlinks, varying when it has little sats on board, but Starship will actually launch up to 120 Starlink satellites in one go, so it'll ramp up production on that side of things.
Yeah, I think it's actually 400 mentioned, or was it 300? So they could actually lift quite a bit more than 120. Yeah, because there's been another render as well of Starship having a larger payload area as well.
And myself and Mikko, for the guys out there, we actually done a deep dive on Starlink and everything else, the positive and negative impacts. So if you want to know a bit more about Starlink, make sure you go and check out that episode. And more interestingly, we've seen SpaceX have some issues with the Falcon 9s and their Merlin engines in the past few weeks. I believe it was an engine gas generator problem. Automatically scrubbed the launch by the computers at the very last second. Elon confirmed that a little time after. But by the looks of it, they're having to go through literally all the engines in the fleet. What do you guys make of that?
Yeah, SpaceX is changing quite a few engines there, and I think tomorrow, or actually today when this episode is released, there is going to be a NASA teleconference where they are talking about Crew 1. I think they actually already said that they will launch the Sentinel-6 mission in November, and few days after they will launch Crew 1 after having a close look at the data from the booster. So I kind of think it's already fixed, and that's quite a fast fix, because it really took like 3 weeks for SpaceX to fix it.
Yeah, because SpaceX and Elon, they're very quick on the mark. If there's a problem, we'll jump on it straight away, get it fixed within, I think, a matter of hours than weeks. Sometimes is from, we probably know, to be honest with you.
When you're working on a SpaceX budget, because, I mean, compare it to the budget that some of the giants get per launch, every second counts, every minute that a team's looking at a problem that needs to be solved is another minute that SpaceX are losing money. And so to see SpaceX turn around a potential problem and actually say, okay, we'll hold our hands up, here's the issue, we're going to fix it. And then to come back in such a short time and say, we've confidently figured out what the problem was, and now going forward, it should be fixed.
Yeah, and while trying to fix the problem, they also launched, I think it was 3 Starlink missions.
Yeah, it's like pre-proven boosters, basically, those ones weren't there? I think the very last one, that was its 3rd flight, and the one before that, last week, I believe that was its 6th flight.
I think the important key to take away from that is they were all in-house launches that SpaceX provided while there was this ongoing issue. There was no customer to destroy the payload of or to make upset. These were in-house launches. It was on SpaceX's dime, and should things have gone wrong, it was at their cost, it was their hardware gone, and really that minimised the amount of potential that this issue could have had, and instead focused strategically and still got some Starlink satellites to orbit.
And I think just spinning back a little bit on that, if hypothetically if there was a problem with one of those engines, Elon said before, we've even seen it in very early launches, if one engine fails, the rocket can still fly on the other eight engines anyway, so it's not the end of the world, but it's not ideal to have an engine cut out.
Yeah, and actually I think they can have 2 engines go out and still make it. And was it in summer, there was some Starlink mission that lost an engine in flight.
Yeah, that actually cut out on ascent, I believe that.
Yeah, it was just before main engine cut off, and the booster wasn't able to land because of that.
Yeah. Alright, I think we'll wrap it up there, guys. Thank you everyone for listening, and I'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening, guys. Catch you in the next episode.